Aurelia Vega slowly stirred the sugar in her coffee cup, watching the crystals slowly dissolve into the hot liquid. The last rays of the setting sun streamed through the large windows of their two-story house, painting the kitchen in warm orange tones. Tadeu sat across the hall, immersed in reading business emails on his tablet. His dark hair was slightly mussed, a habit of constantly running a hand through it when he was concentrating. "You know, I was thinking about the kids again today." Aurelia broke the silence, raising her gaze to her husband. Tadeu set the clipboard aside and his brown eyes met her gaze. A slight shadow of worry appeared on his face. "Again? I thought we discussed this a month ago." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Yes, but—" Aurelia fell silent, choosing her words. "I'm 35 now. Maybe we should seriously think about it." Tadeu exhaled slowly. His fingers squeezed her palm a little harder. "Look, now is not a good time. My business is just starting to bring in a steady income. It will take at least another year for things to settle down." Aurelia released her hand and stood up, walking to the window. Their garden, small but manicured, was drowning in the twilight. She adjusted the fine linen curtain, a wedding gift from Tadeu's mother. "You said the same thing a year ago." Her voice sounded quiet, but there was an undercurrent of bitterness in it. "Because it's true." Tadeu stood up as well and walked up behind her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Can you imagine how unfair it would be to the child if we couldn't give him the best of everything?" His breath tickled her neck, and Aurelia nestled involuntarily against him. 12 years of marriage had taught her to sense the slightest change in his mood. He was tense now, though he tried to hide it. "I'm just afraid we keep putting it off and time is running out." She turned to face him, peering into his eyes. "Let's give ourselves a little more time." Tadeu kissed her forehead lightly. 6 months. A year at the most. Besides, you're going through such an important period at work right now. I thought you told me about the new project." Aurelia nodded, feeling a familiar heaviness growing inside. Yes, work. She was indeed immersed in a massive project to reorganize the sales department, but could it really compare to the desire to have a child? Evening was slowly descending on their quiet neighborhood in the suburbs. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. The muffled voices of neighbors returning from work came from the street. An ordinary evening in a small Brazilian town where everyone knew each other, where life flowed in a measured and predictable way. "Why don't we order pizza?" Tadeu suggested, breaking the lingering silence. "And watch that movie you were talking about?" Aurelia forced herself to smile. "Come on, just not with pineapples. You know how much I don't like them." Tadeu laughed, pulling out his phone. "In 12 years I've learned all your tastes by heart." They settled on the couch in the living room. Tadeu turned on the new TV, one of the latest purchases from his electronics store. Aurelia rested her head on his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of his cologne, the familiar, native odor she'd known for so many years. The movie wasn't bad, some kind of European drama, but Aurelia couldn't concentrate on the plot. Her thoughts kept returning to the conversation about the children. She remembered the first time they had discussed it seriously 3 years ago. Back then, Tadeu had talked about the unstable economy. Then there was the period when he was expanding his business and taking out a loan from the bank. Then the COVID started, and again it was no time. The pizza was cooling on the coffee table, but Aurelia barely touched her portion. She watched her husband's profile illuminated by the bluish light of the screen. His correct facial features, the slight wrinkle between his eyebrows that appeared when he concentrated. Everything so familiar and yet at the same time. "I'll be late at the store tomorrow," Tadeu said suddenly, not taking his eyes off the screen. "There's a new shipment coming in. I need to check everything out." "Okay," Aurelia replied. "I've been staying late at work lately too. This project requires a lot of attention." She felt her husband tense slightly, but after a second he seemed relaxed again. Perhaps she was just imagining it. The movie ended around 11. They silently cleaned up the rest of dinner, washed the dishes. She washed. He toweled them off, as always. An ordinary evening, ordinary actions practiced over years of living together. Walking up to the bedroom, Aurelia caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was still an attractive woman, slender figure, long dark hair, expressive eyes. But time was inexorably doing its work. The fine wrinkles in the corners of her eyes were becoming more noticeable. Her skin was no longer so firm. In bed, Tadeu immediately turned on his side, muttering, "Good night, darling." Aurelia lay sleepless, staring up at the ceiling. Through the open window came the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. She thought about how their lives had changed in recent years. Once they used to stay up late talking about everything. Now they spent more and more of their evenings in silence. Tadeu stirred in his sleep, mumbled something indistinctly. Aurelia turned on her side, looking at his back. There wasn't more than half a meter between them, but sometimes she thought that distance was getting larger and larger. Tomorrow would be a new day of work, new worries, new hopes. Aurelia closed her eyes, trying to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. In her head, the scraps of today's conversation swirled, mixed with plans for tomorrow, and the vague anxiety that had been visiting her at night more and more often lately. The morning began with the ringing of the alarm clock at 6:30. Aurelia woke before Tadeu and went quietly down to the kitchen. She brewed herself a strong cup of coffee and pulled a non-fat yogurt out of the refrigerator. She'd been particularly careful about her diet and appearance lately, as if she were trying to hold on to her slipping youth. Tadeu came downstairs just as she was about to go out. He was wearing a dark blue suit, his favorite, the one she had given him for his last birthday. "Don't forget, I'm out late tonight," he reminded her, kissing her cheek hurriedly. He smelled of fresh cologne and toothpaste. Aurelia nodded mechanically, adjusting the strap of her wristwatch, another gift from her husband for their 10th wedding anniversary. The office greeted her with its usual bustle. Virginia Costa, her closest co-worker and friend, was already in place, leaning over her laptop. Her red hair was gathered into a careless bun, and a large cup of coffee was smoking on her desk. "Good morning," Aurelia set her bag on her desk. "How's the report coming along?" Virginia looked up and a tired smile appeared on her face. "Third time redoing it. Bosses are demanding a new format. You okay?" Aurelia turned on the computer, watching the screen slowly load. "Fine. Talked to Tadeu about the kids again yesterday." "I?" Virginia turned around in her chair, looking intently at her friend. "As always, not the time." Aurelia tried to speak evenly, but her voice treacherously trembled. At that moment, their department head entered the office, and the conversation had to be interrupted. The usual working day began. Meetings, calls, endless emails. Aurelia immersed herself in her work, trying not to think about yesterday's conversation. By noon, she was giving a presentation on a new project to the entire department. 30 pairs of eyes watched her as she explained the charts and graphs. She felt confident. This was her element. Here in the office, she knew exactly what she wanted and how to achieve it. "Great job, Aurelia," her supervisor praised her after the presentation. "I think in a month or two we'll be able to implement the new system." She nodded gratefully, gathering her papers from her desk. In her 12 years with the company, she had built a successful career. Starting out as a simple sales manager, she was now in charge of an entire division. She was valued, her opinion was listened to. After lunch, Virginia came to her desk. "Listen, we're going to Marcella's tonight. Carolina promised to bring that Argentine wine you like. Will you join us?" Aurelia hesitated for a second. Tadeu would be at work late. No one would be expecting her at home. "Yeah, I guess so," she smiled. "It's been a while since we've all seen each other." The day stretched slowly. Aurelia checked reports, answered emails, interviewed a new employee. All business as usual, but there was a strange tension growing inside. She caught her reflection in the computer screen, the dark circles under her eyes giving away the sleepless night. At 6 in the evening, she and Virginia left the office. The spring air was filled with the scent of blossoming trees. They took a cab to Marcella's house, a small but cozy mansion on the outskirts of town. Marcella, the successful owner of a beauty salon, met them at the entrance. Her long black hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and large earrings glittered in her ears. "Finally!" Marcella hugged her friends. "Carolina is already here, opening the wine." Waiting for them in the living room was Caroline Paixotu, the youngest of their company, but already a well-known journalist in town. She was pouring dark red wine into glasses, her short hair disheveled and a mischievous smile playing on her face. "To the meeting," she proclaimed, raising her glass. They settled into comfortable armchairs. Marcella took out light appetizers, cheese, olives, crackers. The scent of scented candles, the new hobby of the lady of the house, wafted through the air. "Well, tell me about it." Marcella looked at Aurelia carefully. "Virginia said you had that conversation about the children again?" Aurelia took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "Yes, last night. It's the same old thing. It's not time. We need to wait. Business first." "But you're not getting any younger," Caroline observed. "I'm sorry to be blunt." "Caro!" Marcella yelled back at her. "No, she's right." Aurelia twirled her glass in her hands. "I'm already 35, and Tadeu keeps finding reasons to put it off." "Maybe he's just afraid of the responsibility," Virginia suggested. "Men often react that way." Aurelia shook her head. "I don't know. He didn't used to be like that. Something has changed lately. He's become more aloof. He often stays late at work." "You think?" Caroline began, but faltered under Marcella's stern gaze. "No," Aurelia said firmly. "No, Tadeu isn't like that. It's just work, stress, loans." The conversation turned to other topics. Carolina talked about her new investigation. Marcella shared plans to expand the salon. But Aurelia could feel her friend's worried looks on her. She got home around 11. The house was empty and dark. A message from Tadeu was flashing on her answering machine. He'd be delayed another couple hours. Supply problems. Aurelia walked slowly up to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, looking at their wedding photo on the bedside table. Young, happy faces. She remembered that day down to the smallest detail, how her hands trembled as she put the ring on his finger, how he looked at her with love and tenderness. In the bathroom, she took a long look at her face in the mirror. No, time had not yet managed to leave deep marks, but it was moving inexorably forward, taking her dreams of motherhood with it. She showered, changed into her nightgown, and went to bed. Tadeu came in after 1 o'clock in the morning. She pretended to be asleep, listening to him walk quietly around the room undressing. The mattress sagged under his weight, but he didn't move toward her as he had done before. Just lay on his side of the bed, leaving the familiar space between them. A week passed. Aurelia sat at her desk, mechanically browsing social media news during her lunch break. Virginia had left for a client meeting, and the office was unaccustomedly quiet. Only the hum of the air conditioner broke the silence. My fingers automatically slid across the phone screen, scrolling through the endless news feed until my eyes caught a familiar face. Ricardo Mendonça, a sales manager from Tadeu's company, had posted an album of photos from a corporate event. Aurelia frowned. Her husband hadn't mentioned any event last week. The first few photos were nothing special, standard group shots of employees, a cake with the company logo on it, congratulatory speeches. But the further she leafed through, the tighter something inside clenched. In several of the shots, Tadeu stood next to a young woman, a tall, slender brunette in a tight-fitting navy blue dress. They stood too close for mere co-workers. Aurelia zoomed in on one of the photos. Tadeu's arm rested on the girl's waist. They were both laughing as they looked at each other. She had never seen this woman before, though she was familiar with almost all the employees of her husband's company. Virginia returned to the office, tapping her heels on the parquet floor. "You won't believe what happened at the meeting." She faltered when she saw her friend's face. "What is it?" Aurelia silently held out her phone to her. Virginia crouched on the edge of the table, scrutinizing the photos. "Maybe it's just a coworker," she suggested tentatively. "One I've never met, and he didn't even mention the corporate event." Aurelia picked up her phone, looking at the pictures again. "Look at the way he's looking at her." The rest of the workday passed like a blur. Aurelia made mistakes in paperwork, sent a letter twice to the wrong recipient, and during an important meeting she couldn't concentrate on the discussion. In front of her eyes stood that picture, the happy face of her husband, his hand on the waist of a stranger. She arrived home earlier than usual. Tadeu was already there, talking on the phone in his home office. The door was ajar and she heard a scrap of conversation. "Yes, of course. We'll discuss tomorrow." "No, she doesn't know." "Okay, see you tomorrow." He fell silent as he heard her footsteps. He quickly said goodbye and put the phone down. "You're early today," he smiled as he left the office. "Yeah, decided early," Aurelia tried to speak calmly. "How was last week? Nothing interesting happened?" Tadeu shrugged. "The usual routine. Lots of paperwork, meetings with suppliers." "And the corporate party?" He froze for a moment, but immediately waved his hand casually. "Oh, that... just a simple work event. Nothing special." "I've seen the pictures." Aurelia pulled out her phone. "Who's the girl in the blue dress?" "Joanna." He spoke casually, but his gaze avoided her eyes. "The new accountant. Didn't I tell you? We hired her a month ago." "No, you didn't." Aurelia felt her hands shaking. "And you didn't tell me about the corporate retreat either." "Honey, it's just a work party. I didn't think you'd be interested." He stepped closer and tried to hug her, but she pulled away. "You didn't think?" Her voice rang with tension. "You're in all the pictures next to her." "Aurelia, stop it." An annoyed note appeared in his voice. "She's a new employee. I, as a supervisor, should have paid attention to her. You yourself know how important it is to maintain good team relations." Aurelia remained silent. There was a lump in her throat and it was difficult to speak. She went upstairs to the bedroom, leaving her husband downstairs. She sat on the bed, clutching her cell phone in her hands. Opened the photos again, taking in every detail. The way they stood close, the way their shoulders touch, the way they look at each other. Tadeu didn't come up behind her. She could hear him walking around downstairs, talking on the phone in a muffled voice. Then the front door slammed. He'd gone somewhere without even warning her. Aurelia went down to the kitchen, mechanically pulled groceries out of the refrigerator. She needed to make something for dinner, but her hands wouldn't listen. She looked at the neatly chopped vegetables, at the frying pan they had bought together 3 years ago in a large shopping center. They'd spent a long time picking it out, arguing, laughing. The phone vibrated. A message from Virginia. "How are you? Should I come over?" "No, I'm fine." She quickly typed a reply. The last thing she wanted to do right now was talk to anyone. Tadeu returned 2 hours later. He smelled of alcohol and cigarettes, even though he'd quit smoking 5 years ago. Silently, he went up to shower, not even glancing at the untouched dinner on the table. Aurelia sat in the living room, mindlessly changing channels on the TV. Every sound from upstairs, her husband's footsteps, the sound of water, the creak of a closet door, echoed with pain inside. She tried to remember when she'd noticed the first change in his behavior. Increased delays at work, the new cologne, the habit of locking his cell phone. It all added up to the picture she'd refused to see for so long. She lay awake at night. Her husband had always held her before bed, but now it was as if an invisible wall had grown between them. She remembered their last conversation about the children, his excuses and evasive answers. Maybe he was already planning another family, with that young woman in the blue dress. In the morning, Tadeu left early, not even having breakfast. Aurelia was alone in their large house, which suddenly seemed foreign and cold to her. She looked around the kitchen, everything so familiar, so native, but now everything reminded her of a possible betrayal. She got ready for work slowly, machine-like. She put on a strict suit, carefully put on makeup, trying to hide the traces of a sleepless night. In the mirror, she looked like a beautiful, successful woman, but her eyes showed her inner pain and confusion. On her way to the office, she decided to stop by her husband's electronics store, just for fun, unannounced. She parked across the street and sat in the car for a long time, staring at the glass doors. Somewhere out there behind them was the Joanna in the blue dress, the one who had stood so close to her husband in the photographs. Aurelia didn't go home that night. She wrote a short message to Tadeu about going out with her friends and headed for Marcella's house. On the way, she called Virginia and Caroline. They immediately agreed to come. Her friends had been her only support lately. Marcella met her at the door, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and vanilla candles. Her dark eyes showed concern. "You look exhausted. Come in soon. Come in." In the cozy living room, where every detail of the interior had been carefully selected by the lady of the house, Aurelia sank into a soft armchair. Her fingers nervously rubbed the strap of her purse. "I drove to his store today," she pronounced, looking at one point. "Sat in the car for almost an hour, but I never went in." Marcella silently placed a cup of hot coffee in front of her and sat down next to her. "Did you see her?" "No," Aurelia shook her head. "I don't even know why I came here. What would I say? How would I explain my presence?" The doorbell rang. Virginia and Caroline came in. They were quickly seated in the living room, forming the usual circle of support. Caroline, as always, brought a bottle of wine. "I did a little research," she said, pouring the wine into glasses. "This Joanna Quarema actually works for Tadeu as an accountant. 28 years old, single, moved from Sao Paulo 3 months ago. You always find the information you need," Aurelia smiled weakly. "Professional habit?" "I'm a journalist, sweetheart. It's my job," Carolina shrugged. "But that's not the point. What are you going to do?" Aurelia took a sip of wine, feeling the alcohol dull the pain inside a little. "What can I do? All I have are suspicions and a few pictures." "And a drastic change in his behavior," Virginia added. "Constant delays at work, new habits, refusal to talk about the children." "Maybe we should hire a private investigator," Marcella suggested. "No," Aurelia shook her head. "I don't want to stoop to snooping. If there's something between them, I have to find out some other way." A heavy silence hung in the room. It was beginning to get dark outside the window, and Marcella turned on the desk lamp, creating a cozy twilight. Somewhere outside, children were playing, their cheerful voices coming through the ajar window. "Do you remember how you met?" Virginia asked suddenly. Aurelia covered her eyes. Of course she remembered. 12 years ago, at the opening of a new shopping center. She worked for the company that was organizing the event. Tadeu had come in as a potential tenant. Their gazes met across the room and something clicked inside. "He was so attentive," she said quietly. "Everyday flowers, phone calls, little surprises. Said he'd never met a woman like her." "And remember your wedding," Marcella piped up. "You were the most beautiful bride." "And the happiest," added Aurelia. "Do you know what the worst part is? I still love him. Despite all the suspicions, despite all the changes, I just can't stop loving him." Caroline leaned forward. Look, maybe it's not that scary. Maybe it's just a midlife crisis. Men go through that a lot. It's not a crisis, Aurelia shook her head. Something's changed. He doesn't look at me like he used to, doesn't touch me, doesn't share his thoughts. It's like a wall has grown between us. Virginia took her hand. You need to talk to him. A serious talk. No accusations or tantrums. Just ask him straight out. What if I don't want to know the answer? Aurelia looked at her friends with moist eyes. If the truth turns out to be worse than all my suspicions. Marcella moved closer to her, put her arm around her shoulders. Better the bitter truth than the sweet lie. You're strong. You'll get through this. They sat like that until late at night. They talked about the past, about the present, made plans for the future. Her friends tried to distract her, telling funny stories, sharing news. But Aurelia felt the anxiety inside growing with every minute. She got home around midnight. Tadeu was still awake, sitting in the living room with his laptop. Didn't even look up when she walked in. "How was your evening?" he asked, machine generously. "Fine." She stopped in the doorway, scrutinizing his focused face. "What are you doing up?" "Work." He glanced at her briefly. "New project. Lots of documentation." Before, he would have been sure to talk about the project in detail, share his ideas, ask her opinion. Now it was as if a chasm of misunderstanding and reticence lay between them. Aurelia went up to the bedroom, slowly preparing for sleep. Every movement was difficult, as if her body were filled with lead. She could hear Tadeu talking on the phone downstairs, quietly, almost in a whisper. Who was he talking to this late? About what? In the bathroom, she took a long look at herself in the mirror, looking for signs of fading, wrinkles, gray hair. No, she was still an attractive woman. Maybe not as young and fresh as this Joanna, but didn't 12 years together mean anything? Tadeu came up to the bedroom an hour later. He smelled of coffee and cigarettes, which meant he'd smoked again, even though he'd promised to quit. He went to his side of the bed without saying good night. Aurelia lay awake, remembering the conversation with her friends. Maybe they were right? Maybe she should just ask him straight out? But something was stopping her. Fear of hearing the truth. Fear of losing the last vestiges of hope. Saturday morning was overcast. Heavy gray clouds hung over the city, promising rain. Aurelia woke up early. The habit of getting up at 6:30 didn't let up even on weekends. Tadeu was still asleep, his phone vibrating quietly on the bedside table. She went down to the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. The sound of falling coffee drops echoed in the morning silence. Saturday mornings used to be their special time. They'd make breakfast together, plan the weekend, just talk. Now they were each minding their own business, like strangers who happened to be under the same roof. Tadeu's phone vibrated upstairs again, then again, and another. Aurelia froze, listening. Who could be texting him so early on a Saturday? She climbed the stairs, trying to tread quietly. Tadeu was still asleep, sprawled out on the bed. His phone lay on the nightstand with the screen facing up. A new message popped up on the screen. The sender's name was Joanna C. Aurelia felt her heart skip a beat. Normally, her husband's phone was locked, but now the screen was glowing, showing the latest messages. "Good morning, love. Can't wait to see you. Yesterday was so good." Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone. Her fingers slid across the screen, opening all the correspondence. Dozens, hundreds of messages, pictures, confessions of love, plans to meet. All the things she'd feared but didn't want to believe were now lying in front of her, black and white. "I miss you so much. When will you finally leave her? We're going to be such a beautiful family." Tadeu moved in his sleep. Aurelia quickly put the phone down and slipped out of the bedroom. Her legs barely held her as she made her way down the stairs. In the kitchen, the coffee had already overflowed over the rim of the cup, forming a dark puddle on the countertop. She mechanically wiped up the spilled coffee while scraps of messages she'd read swirled in her head. 3 months. Their affair had been going on for 3 months now. All this time, while she'd been tormented by suspicion, they'd been openly texting each other, dating, making plans for the future. An incoming call on her own phone made her wince. Bernardo, her brother. "Hi, sis." His voice sounded unaccustomedly serious. "How are you?" "Bernardo." She tried to say something else, but her voice trailed off. "I'll be right there," he said, hearing her tone. "Don't go anywhere." Bernardo arrived 20 minutes later. By this time, Tadeu was awake and downstairs, looking through his morning mail on his phone as if nothing had happened. When he saw his brother-in-law, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Bernardo, is something wrong?" "We need to talk." Bernardo placed his leather briefcase on the table. "Aurelia, are you ready?" She nodded, avoiding looking at her husband. Tadeu shifted his gaze from one to the other. "Talk about what? What's going on?" "About your affair with Joanna Quaresma." Bernardo's voice was cold and professional. "And about how we're going to formalize the divorce." Tadeu's face changed. He turned pale, then red, his hands clenched into fists. "What nonsense! What affair?" "I saw your correspondence," Aurelia said quietly. "This morning. All the messages, all the pictures." Tadeu stood up abruptly. "You went through my phone? How dare you?" "Don't you dare raise your voice at her," Bernardo stepped forward. "You're in no position to be outraged here." They sat at the table, Aurelia, Tadeu, and Bernardo. Between them lay the papers that the brother had thoughtfully prepared in advance. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, its rays hitting the glossy surface of the table, creating a glare on the paper. 3 months, Aurelia said, looking her husband in the eye. 3 months you lied to me. Every day, every minute. Tadeu was silent, clutching the cup of cold coffee in his hands. His shoulders slumped as if all the air had been let out of him. "You have a choice," Bernardo said, unfolding the papers. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. In the second case, I'll pull up all your financial records for the last 5 years. I'm sure you'll find a lot of interesting stuff in there." "Are you threatening me?" Tadeu raised his head. "No, just explaining the situation." Bernardo slid the papers toward him. "The choice is yours." Aurelia sat silent, watching this conversation as if from the sidelines. There was an emptiness inside. No tears, no anger, only endless fatigue. 12 years of her life, all the plans, all the dreams. Everything was crumbling before her eyes. "I want to talk to Aurelia alone," Tadeu said suddenly. "No," Bernardo replied firmly. "Anything you want to say, you can say in front of me." Tadeu sighed, ran his hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that made Aurelia's heart clench painfully. "I didn't mean for things to turn out this way," he began. "It just happened. Joanna, she's younger," Aurelia finished for him. "She doesn't talk about children, doesn't remind me of years gone by, doesn't demand responsibility." "It's not that simple," Tadeu shook his head. "Just the opposite." Aurelia's voice showed emotion for the first time that morning. "It's perfectly simple. You chose. Now it's my turn to choose." She reached for the documents lying on the table. Bernardo held out a pen to her. Tadeu looked at her with some strange expression, a mixture of guilt, relief, and fear. "Wait," he tried to stop her hand. "Let's at least discuss this calmly. No lawyers, no paperwork." "Discuss what?" Aurelia looked up at him. "How you planned your new life while I waited for you in the evenings. How did you refuse to have children with me because you were already planning them with her?" It had been a week since that conversation. Tadeu didn't give up. Every day he sent huge bouquets of flowers to Aurelia's office, wrote long apology messages, tried to call. She methodically deleted all the messages without reading and gave the flowers to the cleaning lady. Temporarily, she lived with her brother. Bernardo's large apartment in the city center became her refuge. In the mornings, they had breakfast together. He made her strong coffee and tried to distract her by talking about work. But Aurelia could see the worry in his eyes every time he looked at her drained face. "I need to go home to get my things," she said one morning, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I can't go around in the same thing forever." Bernardo frowned. "I can go with you." "No," she shook her head. "You need to do that yourself." The house greeted her with an unaccustomed silence. Tadeu had to be at work, and she'd chosen that time on purpose. Going up to the bedroom, Aurelia began packing, methodically, carefully putting each item into a large suitcase. Suddenly she heard the sound of the front door opening, quick footsteps on the stairs, and Tadeu appeared in the bedroom doorway. He was disheveled, his tie bunched sideways as if he'd run all the way. "A neighbor called to say she saw your car," he exhaled. "Aurelia, we need to talk." She continued to put things away as if she hadn't heard him. "We have nothing more to talk about." "Please," he stepped closer. "I can explain everything. It was a mistake, a momentary weakness." "Minute?" Aurelia finally turned to him. 3 months is a momentary weakness?" Tadeu ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that had seemed so familiar to her before, but now caused only muffled irritation. "I severed all relations with her, fired her. None of that matters, it's just you and me that matters." "Fired her?" She grinned bitterly. "How noble of you. Doesn't she seem so attractive anymore now that everything has been revealed?" At that moment, Tadeu's cell phone vibrated in his pocket. He hastily pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and quickly turned it off. But Aurelia had time to notice the name on the screen. Joanna C. "I see you've really severed all relationships." She went back to gathering her things. "So much so that she's still calling you." "It's not what you think." He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "What am I supposed to think?" Her voice was ringing with tension. "That you were just showing concern for an employee? That all those texts, pictures, future plans were just friendly communication?" Tadeu sank to the edge of the bed, his shoulders slumped. "I'm confused. She showed up during a difficult period when you and I were estranged. Don't you dare put the blame on me." Aurelia slammed her suitcase shut sharply. "It was your choice. Yours alone." At that moment, Tadeu's phone rang again. He irritably dropped the call, but a moment later a message came through. The screen lit up, showing the beginning of the text. "Beloved, why aren't you answering? Aurelia silently picked up her suitcase and headed for the door. Tadeu jumped up, blocking her way. "Wait. Let's at least try to make things right. For the sake of 12 years of our marriage." "You ruined everything yourself." She stepped around him, trying not to touch him. "And now you're trying to glue the shards together with pretty words." As she walked down the stairs, she could hear him following, continuing to talk about love, about remorse, about second chances. His words bounced off her, finding no response. All these years, she'd believed every word he'd said, every promise he'd made. She believed nothing else. At the front door, Tadeu made one last attempt. "I love only you, always loved only you." Aurelia stopped, slowly turned to him. "You know what the worst part is? I don't even know when you started lying. Maybe you've been lying from the beginning." She walked out without looking back, got into the car, put her hands on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, she saw Tadeu standing in the doorway, his figure seeming unaccustomedly small and lost. The phone in her bag vibrated. A message from Virginia. "He came to the office, looking for you, talked to his superiors." Followed by a message from Marcella. "Honey, he called me. He asked about you. I didn't say anything. Aurelia started the car, so he lied even now, trying to win her back. Lying had become second nature to him. He just couldn't tell the truth anymore. On the way to her brother's house, she spotted Tadeu's familiar car following her at a distance. He clearly wasn't going to give up for nothing. At a stoplight, she pulled out her phone, texted Bernard. "He's coming for me." The reply came instantly. "I'll meet you out front. Don't worry." Bernardo was indeed waiting for her at the entrance. When he saw Tadeu's car parked nearby, he walked determinedly toward her. Aurelia couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw her brother saying something, leaning against the car window. A few minutes later, Tadeu drove away. "What did you say to him?" she asked as they went up to the apartment. Reminded him of the possible consequences of stalking, Bernardo helped her with her suitcase, and that I have friends in the police force. In the evening, Marcella called. He came into the salon. He looked awful, wrinkled, unshaven. He asked if you'd been in touch with me. "And what did you say?" "Said I hadn't seen you since that day." Marcella could hear the concern in her voice. "But you know what's strange? An hour after he did, this Joanna came in. She was making an appointment for a haircut, and she asked about you casually." Aurelia squeezed the phone. What exactly did she ask? "Where you live, where you work." I didn't say anything, of course, but she's obviously up to something. After the conversation, Aurelia sat at the window in her brother's living room for a long time. The evening city was bustling below, people hurrying home from work. Ordinary life went on while her own world fell apart. Bernardo brought her a cup of herbal tea. "You need to rest. Tomorrow is a big day, the first divorce hearing." "Do you think he'll come?" "He will." Bernardo sat down next to her. "And he'll probably try to complicate things. But we have proof of his infidelity, financial documents. I just want this to be over." Aurelia cupped her palms around the cup, warming her frozen fingers. The workday was coming to an end when Aurelia noticed her husband's familiar car driving past the office. She froze at the window, watching the silver sedan disappear around the corner. It was the third time in a week that Tadeu had driven past her work as if by chance. Virginia walked over to her, put a hand on her shoulder. "Him again?" Aurelia nodded, not taking her eyes off the street. "Every day at the same time. It's like he's patrolling the area." "Maybe we should let Bernard know?" "No." Aurelia turned resolutely away from the window. "I'll take care of it myself." She sat down at her desk, turned on her computer. Several unread emails glowed on the screen, all from Tadeu from different addresses. He wrote to her every day, going through every possible means of communication. The letters remained unread. The phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "I know where you're hiding. Do you think you can hold on to him? He loves me." Aurelia silently deleted the message. Joanna was becoming more and more persistent in her attempts to provoke her. In the evening, as she left the office, she saw her husband's car driving past again. She didn't drive to her brother's house. Instead, she turned onto a county road and followed her husband's car, not realizing why. She was following him now. The neighborhood was becoming less and less familiar, quiet streets with private homes, manicured lawns, high fences. Tadeu drove confidently, as if he knew the road well. Finally, he stopped at a two-story house with white walls and a tiled roof. Aurelia parked off to the side behind a tall lilac bush. She saw Tadeu get out of the car, pulling some kind of package from the back seat. Joanna was already waiting for him on the porch, in a light house dress, her hair loose. They embraced, and Tadeu followed her into the house. Aurelia's hands trembled as she pulled out her cell phone. A few pictures, her husband's car outside the house, the moment they met on the porch. Then she dialed a number. "Bernard? I know where they're meeting." Her brother didn't answer right away. "Where are you?" "In the Santa Teresa neighborhood. I followed him." "Stay where you are," Bernardo sounded alarmed in his voice. I'm on my way. But Aurelia was already out of the car. Her feet carried her toward the house where her husband and his mistress were hiding. Only one thought pulsed in her head: to see everything with her own eyes, to receive final confirmation of the betrayal. The front door was unlocked. Muffled voices and music came from inside. Aurelia quietly climbed the porch steps, pushed open the door. A dim light burned in the spacious living room, wine glasses and plates of appetizers on the coffee table. She moved on, toward the sound of voices. A streak of light fell from the ajar bedroom door. Tadeu was saying something in a quiet, gentle voice, the way he had once spoken to her. It's almost over, love. Soon we'll be together. Won't she just let you go? Joanna's voice sounded cranky. Have you seen how she clings to the past? She'll sign all the papers on my terms, Tadeu said confidently. She has no choice. Aurelia froze at the door, unable to move from her seat. Every word hit her like a physical blow. They were talking about her, planning her future, deciding her fate. And the baby? Joanna asked. Have you told her yet? No. Tadeu could hear the irritation in her voice. Now is not the time. She's on edge as it is. But I'm already 2 months along. Tears welled up in Joanna's voice. I can't hide it any longer. Aurelia felt the ground go from under her feet. Pregnant. The very pregnancy she'd dreamed of all these years. The thing Tadeu had always denied her, citing bad timing. She pushed open the door. In the bedroom, Tadeu and Joanna sat on the edge of the bed, his hand resting on her stomach. They jumped up when they saw Aurelia in the doorway. What a surprise! Joanna was the first to come to her senses. She straightened up, defiantly placing her hand on her stomach. Decided to pay a visit? Tadeu turned pale. Aurelia, I can explain. What exactly? Her voice sounded unexpectedly calm. How you lied to me all these years. How you denied me children because you planned them with someone else. It's not like that. He took a step toward her, but she backed away. No, it's exactly like that. Joanna stood next to Tadeu, taking his hand. We love each other, and we're going to have a child. And you're just a liability. At that moment, the front door slammed downstairs and quick footsteps were heard on the stairs. Bernardo burst into the bedroom, followed by Caroline with her camera. Excellent! The journalist quickly snapped a few shots of the stunned couple. I think this is enough for an article on the double life of a respected businessman. You wouldn't dare. Tadeu stepped forward, but Bernardo blocked his path. You bet we dare, he turned to his sister. Let's go, Aurelia. We have everything we need. It all happened too fast. Tadeu lunged forward, trying to snatch the camera from Carolina, but Bernardo managed to intercept him. Joanna retreated to the window, wrapping her arms around her stomach as if defending herself. Delete those photos immediately. Tadeu's voice shook with rage. You have no right. No right? Aurelia took a step forward. Did you have the right to lie to me all these years? Had the right to start a second family behind my back? Her voice echoed off the bedroom walls. She looked around the room, the light-colored curtains, the obviously new furniture, the pictures on the walls. Everything breathed coziness here. Everything said that these two had been creating their nest while she'd been living in ignorance. This isn't a second family, Tadeu tried to pull himself together. It's complicated. What exactly is complicated? Aurelia walked over to the bedside table, picking up a framed photograph. It showed Tadeu and Joanna laughing, embracing against the sea. I think it's pretty simple. You had a mistress, made her a child, and built this house for her. The house belongs to me, Joanna suddenly raised her voice. I bought it with my own money. With money he paid you? Aurelia turned to her. Or with the money he transferred to your account? Joanna turned pale. How do you... Oh, I know a lot of things, Aurelia put her frame back in place. Like about how he set up an extra credit card for you, or about how he helped you get a loan from a bank where he has connections. Tadeu jerked as if from a blow. Have you been following me? No, darling. Bitterness rang in her voice. It's just that you've gotten too careless, leaving papers in the home office, forgetting to delete history on the computer. Caroline continued taking pictures, moving around the room. Her professional eye snatched out details, the photos together, the man's shirt on the back of a chair, the two toothbrushes in a glass on the bathroom shelf. Stop filming! Joanna tried to block the lens with her hand. This is private property. It's evidence, Bernardo replied calmly, which we'll use in court if necessary. Tadeu sank slowly to the edge of the bed, covered his face with his hands. What do you want, Aurelia? Money? I'll give you as much as you ask for. Those words hit the hardest. Aurelia felt something inside her finally snap. Do you really think it's about money? After 12 years of marriage? What is it about then? Joanna stepped forward. You see, he doesn't love you anymore. He chose me. We are going to have a child. A child. Aurelia turned to her. The same child I've dreamed of all these years. The one I asked him for, begged him for, and he kept finding reasons to say no? Her voice trailed off. Bernardo took a step toward his sister, but she stopped him with a gesture. No, I have to say it. Do you know how many times I've cried myself to sleep at night, thinking there was something wrong with me? That I can't give him what he wants? Joanna pulled back, showing uncertainty for the first time. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Aurelia chuckled bitterly. He didn't tell you about our plans, about how we chose names for our future children, how we discussed what school we would put them in. Tadeu looked up. Stop. No, now you'll listen. Aurelia raised her voice. All these years you've been convincing me to wait, talking about bad timing, about financial difficulties, about your unpreparedness, and yourself, planning a family with another woman. A heavy silence hung in the room. Only the quiet whirring of Caroline's camera and Tadeu's heavy breathing could be heard. I loved you, Aurelia continued in a quieter voice. Believed every word you said. Waited for you to be ready. And all this time you've been... It didn't happen all at once. Tadeu rose, trying to approach her. Joanna. She just showed up at the right moment. The right moment? Aurelia stepped back. When exactly? When I started talking about children for the umpteenth time? Or when I started noticing my first wrinkles? Joanna sobbed suddenly. He said you've been living like strangers for a long time, that all you think about is work. Didn't he say why I immerse myself in work? Aurelia turned to her. Because there was a man waiting for me at home, a man who grew more distant every day, who found any excuse not to be with me. Bernardo put a hand on her shoulder. That's enough, sister. We have everything we need. But Aurelia couldn't stop. Years of silence, of pain, of bewilderment, it all came out. Do you know what the worst thing is? I could feel that something was wrong. I saw the signs, I saw the changes, but I was so afraid to believe it was betrayal that I convinced myself to doubt everything. Tadeu tried to move closer to her again. I never meant to hurt you, but you did, she looked up at him, and you continue to inflict. Even now you lie, try to manipulate, offer money. And what do you want? Joanna suddenly exploded. He's not yours anymore. He's mine, and the baby is mine too. Those words were like a slap in the face and brought Aurelia to her senses. She straightened up, squared her shoulders. You're right. He's not mine anymore. And you know what? I'm even glad of it. She turned to Bernard. Let's go. There's nothing more to do here. Wait. Tadeu grabbed her arm. We have to talk. About what? She released her hand. About how you betrayed everything I believed in? Or about how you're trying to pay me off now? Caroline took one last picture and put the camera away. I have enough material. I think your lawyer will be pleased." They headed for the exit. Joanna's screams and Tadeu's heavy footsteps echoed behind them, but no one looked back. It was already dark outside, the streetlights casting yellow circles of light on the asphalt. Aurelia got into her brother's car. She couldn't drive herself. Her hands were shaking, her temples were pounding. Through the window she saw Tadeu run out onto the porch but stopped, hesitant to come any closer. "You know," she said when they pulled away, "I should be grateful to her." "Grateful?" Bernardo interjected in surprise. "Yes," Aurelia looked straight ahead. "She showed me the real face of the man I thought was the love of my life. And now I am free." The next morning began with an insistent knock on the door of Bernardo's apartment. Aurelia, who had spent a sleepless night in the guest room, flinched at the sound. Her brother was at work, and she wasn't expecting visitors. The knocking was repeated, louder this time. A woman's voice behind the door said, "I know you're in there, Aurelia. Open up. We need to talk." "Joanna." Aurelia slowly walked to the door but was in no hurry to open it. "We have nothing to talk about." "There is." The voice outside the door grew louder. "Open up, or I'll make a scandal for the whole entryway." Aurelia turned the key in the lock. Joanna stood on the threshold, pale, with disheveled hair, wearing an expensive business suit that only emphasized her nervousness. "What do you want?" Aurelia asked, not inviting her in. Joanna squeezed into the apartment, ignoring her landlady's unspoken reluctance. "To talk about yesterday, about the pictures your journalist friend took." Aurelia strode into the living room. Joanna followed her. The morning light fell through the large windows, making the situation even more surreal. Two women bound by the same man stood opposite each other. "You have to make her delete those pictures." Joanna put her hand on her stomach in a characteristic protective gesture. "Think of the baby." "About the baby?" Aurelia grinned bitterly. "About the very one I've wanted so badly all these years?" "That's different." Joanna sank into the chair as if her legs wouldn't hold her. "Tadeu loves me, really loves me." "Like he loved me 12 years ago?" Aurelia remained standing, looking down at the intruder. "Or how he swore his love at our wedding." At that moment the front door opened. Tadeu stood on the threshold. He looked crumpled, as if he had been up all night. "Joanna, I told you not to come here." "Did you?" Aurelia turned to her husband. "Did someone invite you?" "I came to talk." He took a step into the room. Calmly, like grown men. Grown men. Aurelia felt a wave of anger rising inside. Grown men don't start a second family behind their wife's back. Joanna rose from her chair. "Don't you dare yell at him. You just can't handle the fact that he chose me." "Chose you?" Aurelia laughed, but that laugh was full of bitterness. He didn't choose. He just took whatever he wanted without thinking of the consequences. Tadeu stepped between them. "Stop it, both of you. Aurelia, let's just discuss the terms of the divorce. I'm willing to give you half of everything." "What?" Joanna turned sharply toward him. "What other half? You promised we'd buy a new house." "Honey, now is not the time," Tadeu began, but Joanna interrupted him. "No, now is the time. I'm pregnant with your child and you want to give everything to her?" Aurelia watched the scene, feeling strangely detached. It was as if she were watching a play in a theater where the actors were acting out the drama of her life. "You know," she said, turning to Joanna, "you don't realize what you've gotten yourself into yet. You think he's changed. You think it's going to be different with you?" "Shut up." Joanna stepped toward her with her hand raised for a punch. Tadeu intercepted her arm. "Don't! You can't worry." Aurelia stepped closer. "Now you're worried about the children. Where was that concern when I begged you for a child?" "I said shut up." Tadeu suddenly turned around and shoved Aurelia with force. She flew back against the wall, hitting it hard. A ringing silence hung in the room. Joanna clasped her hands to her mouth, and Tadu froze as if unable to believe what he had just done. "Now," Aurelia said slowly, rubbing her bruised shoulder, "I see your real face." "I didn't mean to." Tadu took a step toward her. "You drove me. Stay back." She put her hand out in front of her. "Don't you dare even come near me." At that moment, Bernardo ran into the apartment. Apparently the neighbors had called him when they heard the noise. "What's going on here?" He looked around at the scene, Aurelia against the wall, a frightened Joanna, a confused Tadu. "Your son-in-law just showed what he's capable of." Aurelia straightened slowly. "Hitting me in defense of his pregnant mistress." Bernardo's face darkened with anger. "You did what?" "She left me no choice," Tadu recoiled. "She threatened us. She wanted to hurt Joanna." "Liar!" Aurelia shouted. "Even now you continue to lie." Bernardo pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police. This is no longer a family conflict, it's violence." "No!" Joanna clutched at Tadu's arm. "Not the police. Think of our future, of the child." "Get out, both of you." Bernardo's voice was icy. "Immediately, or I'll not only call the police, but an ambulance to examine the beating." Tadu hesitated for a second, then pulled Joanna toward the exit. "Let's go. There's nothing for us to do here." At the door, he turned around. "Aurelia, out!" she shouted, and he finally left. As soon as the door closed, Aurelia slumped to the floor. Bernardo ran up to her. "You need to go to the hospital. We need to get the beatings fixed." "You know what the worst part is?" She looked at her brother with moist eyes. "I still can't believe he did this. The man I loved for 12 years hit me for another woman." Bernardo helped her up. "Now we have everything for the trial. He will answer for it." "I don't recognize him." Aurelia let her brother settle her in the chair. "It's like there's a complete stranger in front of me." "Maybe he's always been like that," Bernard said quietly. "Just hit it well." The police station greeted them with the coolness of air-conditioned air and the smell of coffee. Aurelia sat in a hard chair in the reception area while Bernardo talked to the officer on duty. Her shoulder was still sore and a bruise was showing on her skin, a silent testament to the violence that had occurred. Carolina arrived 10 minutes after their call, bringing photos, both the ones taken at Joanna's house and the new ones that showed the impact mark. She looked as collected and professional as ever, only her eyes betraying her excitement. "I spoke to the editor," she said quietly, taking a seat next to Aurelia. "We're willing to publish the piece if you'd like to publicize it." Aurelia shook her head. "Not yet. We need to go the official route first." A policeman approached them, young, with an attentive gaze. "Senora Vega, come this way, please. We need to record your statement." The small office was stuffy, despite the air conditioning running. Bernardo sat down next to his sister, placing a folder of documents in front of him. The policeman, Sergeant Oliveira, as the sign on the desk read, turned on the tape recorder. "Tell us what happened." His voice was professionally neutral. Aurelia began to speak, slowly, careful not to leave out any details, about how she discovered her husband's infidelity, about the surveillance, about the confrontation at the mistress's house, about this morning's incident. "They came uninvited." Her voice shook, but she kept talking. "Joanna demanded that the pictures be removed. Tadu, he pushed me when I refused." The sergeant made notes in his notebook. "Do you have any witnesses to the incident?" "I do," Bernard said firmly. "I walked in right after the incident, and the neighbors must have heard the noise. And these," Carolina placed an envelope of photographs on the table, "are documentary evidence." Oliveira scrutinized the pictures. "Are you ready to undergo a medical examination?" Aurelia nodded. Her hand automatically reached for her bruised shoulder. "One more thing." Bernardo pulled documents from a folder. "We want to document the adultery. We have evidence, photographs, correspondence, witness statements. The sergeant looked over the papers. You'll need to fill out some forms, and we'll refer you to a medical examiner. The next 2 hours passed like a blur. Aurelia filled out endless paperwork, answered questions, recounted the events of that morning over and over again. Then there was a trip to the medical center, where the doctor carefully recorded and photographed all the injuries. Moderately severe bodily injuries, the doctor stated as he filled out the chart. Soft tissue contusion, hematoma. There could be complications. Bernardo didn't leave his sister's side. He methodically gathered all the documents, made copies, photographed every signature and stamp. This is just the beginning, he said as they walked out of the medical center. Now we have to wait for the police to react. Caroline, who had been with them the whole time, suggested, maybe we should publish the material after all. Public opinion might speed up the process. Aurelia shook her head tiredly. No, let the law do its job. They returned to Bernardo's apartment in the evening. Aurelia felt drained, physically and emotionally. The events of the day, the endless conversations and explanations had drained her of all her strength. Virginia and Marcella were waiting for them. Their friends had brought food and prepared dinner. But Aurelia couldn't eat. A piece wouldn't go down her throat. You must eat, Marcella insisted, setting the salad down for her. You need your strength. Tomorrow will be a hard day, Virginia added. Tadeu will probably start acting up. As if to confirm her words, Aurelia's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she recognized the voice immediately. Tadeu's secretary. Senora Vega, the woman spoke formally and dryly. Senor Machado asks me to tell you that he is ready to discuss the terms of a peace settlement. Peaceful settlement? Aurelia turned on the speakerphone so everyone could hear the conversation. After he hit me? It was a misunderstanding. The secretary's voice took on an ingratiating note. He's willing to compensate for moral damages. Name the amount. Bernardo picked up the phone. Tell Mr. Machado that all negotiations now only through lawyers, and advise him to find a good defense lawyer. He'll need one. After that, the calls came one after another. General acquaintances, Tadeu's business partners, even his mother called, all trying to settle the situation peacefully. He's afraid of publicity, Caroline remarked, making notes in her notebook. It could be a disaster for his business. Let him be afraid. There was firmness in Aurelia's voice for the first time that evening. He must answer for his actions. At night, lying in bed, she heard her brother talking on the phone in the next room, apparently to one of his fellow lawyers. The words came in scraps. Statement, evidence, deadline, compensation. The phone on the nightstand vibrated again. A message from Tadeu. Please, let's talk. I'll explain everything. Don't ruin my life. Aurelia deleted the message without replying. Then another and another. Finally, she just turned off the phone. Moonlight poured in through the window, and somewhere in the distance, the nighttime city was buzzing. Aurelia lay awake, replaying the events of the last few days in her head. How could things have gotten to this point, when love turned to hate and tenderness to cruelty? In the morning, she was awakened by her brother's voice. He was on the phone in the living room, and his tone did not bode well. What do you mean, case closed? We have all the evidence. Aurelia came out of the bedroom. Bernardo paced around the room, clutching the phone. No, this is unacceptable. We will appeal the decision. He ended the call and turned to his sister. Tadeu got to the chief of police. They are trying to hush up the case. Police Chief Hernani Santos's office exuded the aromas of expensive coffee and cigars. The massive mahogany desk was perfectly clean, not a single piece of paper, just a silver pen stand and a brand new laptop. Framed photographs hung on the walls. The police chief shaking hands with important people, receiving awards, smiling for the camera. Tadeu sat in a leather visitor's chair, holding a cup of espresso. His suit was impeccable as always, but his eyes betrayed a sleepless night. "So, you want this case to disappear?" Santos leaned back in his chair, looking intently at his visitor. "Exactly." Tadeu set the cup on the table. "My wife acts emotionally. She doesn't realize she could ruin not only my reputation, but her own as well." The police chief drummed his fingers on the table. "It's not easy. They have medical reports, photographs, witness statements. Money solves many problems." Tadeu pulled an envelope from his inside jacket pocket. "There's enough here to cover all the inconveniences." Santos didn't even look at the envelope. "Her brother is a famous lawyer. He won't just leave it at that." "Double the amount." Tadeu placed a second envelope on the table. "And use your connections. You have connections in the prosecutor's office, don't you?" At that moment there was a knock on the door. The secretary announced that Bernardo Vega had arrived and demanded an immediate meeting. "Let him wait," Santos ordered, but the lawyer's loud voice was already coming from the corridor. Bernardo literally burst into the office, followed by Carolina with her camera at the ready. "What a meeting!" The lawyer's voice oozed sarcasm. "The chief of police and a domestic violence suspect. Lucky shot for the front page, don't you think?" Tadeu jumped up. "This is a private meeting." "Not anymore." Carolina snapped a few shots. "Now it's material for a journalistic investigation into police corruption." Santos went black. "Leave my office immediately. This is an abuse of power." "No." Bernardo put the file folder on the desk. "It's called fighting corruption. I have evidence that you were bribed to close my sister's case." Tadeu tried to discreetly pick up the envelopes from the table, but Carolina had already managed to take a picture of them. "Don't bother," she smiled. "I have witnesses who will confirm the purpose of your visit." Santos sank slowly into his chair. "What do you want?" "Justice." Bernardo opened a folder. "Here is the allegation of abuse of authority. Here are the files on the other cases you've bungled over the last year. And here," he placed another document on top, an application to the federal prosecutor's office. Tadeu turned pale. "You're bluffing. You have no proof." "Really?" Carolina pulled out a tape recorder. "And the recording of your conversation with Mr. Santos, where you discussed the amount of the bribe." The police chief jumped up. "That's illegal. You had no right to record it." "I did." Another figure appeared in the doorway. A young woman in a police officer's uniform. "Sergeant Maria Almeida, Internal Security. We've been monitoring your activities for a long time, Mr. Santos." A heavy silence hung in the office. Tadeu slowly sank back into his chair, his face turning ash gray. "You're under arrest." Sergeant Almeida pulled out the handcuffs. "Both of you, for attempted bribery and accepting a bribe from an official." "Wait!" Tadeu jumped up. "You can't. I have a pregnant woman, a business." "You should have thought of that earlier." Bernardo gathered the documents back into the folder. "When they raised their hand against my sister, when they tried to buy the law." Within an hour, news of the arrest of the police chief and a prominent businessman had spread through the city. Carolina had already sent the story to the editorial office. The article was to appear in the morning edition. Aurelia found out when Bernardo brought her to the new police station to testify. A different investigator was now in charge of her case. Young, energetic, unbound by old commitments. "We're reopening the investigation," he reported, reviewing the case file. "All evidence has been preserved. Witnesses are ready to testify. Justice will now be impartial." Aurelia sat in the hallway of the station while her brother chatted with the investigator. Tadeu walked past in handcuffs. He didn't even look up at her. Santos followed. His once confident gait transformed into an aging shuffle. How are you?" Virginia took a seat next to her friend. She'd rushed to the station as soon as she'd heard the news. "I don't know," Aurelia answered honestly. "It all happened so fast. Even this morning it looked like they'd won, and now justice will be served." Marcella came from the other side, holding out a glass of water. Carolina was still busy. She was taking comments from the police officers, taking pictures, taking notes. Her reporter's nature demanded that she record every detail of this historic moment. Toward evening, Joanna arrived at the station. She was hysterical, screaming about her pregnancy, her ruined life, demanding a lawyer. They calmed her down, but in vain. "What will happen to her?" Aurelia asked her brother. "Nothing," Bernardo shook his head. "She hasn't committed a crime. At most, she'll be a witness in a corruption case." In the evening, they gathered in Bernardo's apartment. Caroline brought the first drafts of tomorrow's article. Police corruption: how a love triangle uncovered a criminal scheme. "Are you sure you want to go public with this?" Marcella asked, looking over the text. Aurelia nodded. "People need to know. Maybe it will help other women who find themselves in a similar situation." Virginia put her arm around her friend's shoulders. "You're very brave. Not everyone dares to go against the system." "I'm not brave," Aurelia shook her head. "Just tired of being afraid, tired of being silent, tired of letting others decide my fate." Caroline's article had a bombshell effect. By noon, all the local news sites had reprinted the story. The newsroom's phones were ringing off the hook, and reporters from all over the state had gathered outside the police building. Aurelia sat in her brother's office, watching the news on her tablet. Her picture was everywhere: serious face, direct gaze, a bruise on her shoulder. Next to it was a photo of Tadeu in handcuffs and former police chief Santos walking out of the station with his head down. "The federal prosecutor's office has taken special control of the case." Bernardo laid fresh documents in front of her. "They've sent a special commission. It looks like the Santos story is just the tip of the iceberg." Quick footsteps were heard in the corridor. It was Carolina coming in, waving a folder of documents. "I have a scoop. My sources have found evidence that Tadeu has been bribing officials for years. This is not his first case with Santos." She spread out on the table copies of bank statements, photographs, printouts of email correspondence. The story of corruption unfolded before them like a detective novel. "Right here," Caroline pointed to one of the statements, "is the first transfer to Santos, dated as recently as last year. And here are the closing certificates for other cases: domestic violence, fraud, tax evasion." Aurelia slowly thumbed through the documents. "So, he's been doing this for a long time? Been leading a double life all these years?" "A triple one," Caroline corrected. "Businessman, model husband, and criminal. Each role perfectly practiced." At that moment, Virginia entered the office. "The hospital just called. Joanna has lost her baby." Aurelia froze. Despite everything that had happened, this news echoed in her heart. She knew all too well what it meant to lose hope of motherhood. "She's hysterical," Virginia continued. "Demands a lawyer and a meeting with Tadeu, but he's already been escorted to the capital. The feds have taken him away." Bernardo shook his head. "He's not interested in her now. The commission has uncovered a whole network of corrupt ties. Tadeu is facing serious jail time." A young assistant entered the office, bringing fresh newspapers. On the front page of the city's main newspaper was the headline, "Corruption Scandal Uncovered Thanks to One Woman's Courage." "You've become a heroine," Caroline smiled. "A symbol of the fight against domestic violence and corruption." Aurelia set the paper aside. "I didn't want to be a heroine. I just wanted justice." Bernard's phone rang. The federal prosecutor's office was calling. The conversation was long. His brother paced around the office, making notes in his notebook. "What is it?" Aurelia asked when he was done talking. Santos is testifying. Bernardo sat down at his desk. Tells everything. About bribes, about closed cases, about criminal schemes. Looks like he's decided to save his own skin. And Tadeu? He's not talking. Demands a lawyer and refuses to testify. By evening, a message from the investigator came. Santos had written a confession. His testimony confirmed all suspicions and revealed new details of the criminal scheme. He named names, Bernardo said as he looked over the document, everyone who was involved, including high-ranking officials. Aurelia stood at the window, looking out at the setting sun. The city was bustling below, people hurrying home from work, unaware of the drama unfolding in high offices. "You know," she said without turning around, "I keep thinking about Joan, about how she dreamed of a child, of a new life." "She was a victim of his lies just like you," Virginia replied quietly. "But made her choice," Caroline added. "Knew she was destroying someone else's family." Aurelia's phone rang again, the number for the federal prison. Tadeu decided to call after all. "Don't take it," he told Bernard. "Let her talk everything through the lawyers." But she had already hit the answer button. Her husband's voice sounded muffled, as if from another world. "Aurelia, I want to apologize." "For what exactly?" Her voice was calm. "For cheating? For lying? For the punch? Or for years of pretending?" "For everything." He was quiet. "I got confused, thought I could control the situation." "But you couldn't," she finished for him. "Now pay for your decisions." She hung up without finishing his answer. Silence hung in the office, broken only by the noise of the air conditioner and the distant hum of the city outside the window. "What now?" Marcella asked. Aurelia turned to her friends. "Now? Now there will be a trial, and the truth will finally come out.